In terms of midlife updates, this would have to be one of the better executions I've seen in a while. The previous model of this car, it wasn't a bad looking thing, but I don't know if I would call it handsome. But now in 2023, I definitely would. This is the 2024 Hyundai Sonata. It has been updated quite extensively, as you can see on the outside, but there are some changes inside, changes to the chassis as well. We've still got a 2.5 litre turbocharged petrol engine under the bonnet. And for those who don't want an SUV just yet, yes, there are some people who still buy sedans. This could be a really good option. Let's have a closer look. The 2024 Hyundai Sonata N line is priced from $55,500 plus on-road costs, which pins it against the likes of a turbocharged Mazda 6 Atenza, a cheaper Toyota Camry, a smaller but faster Hyundai i30N, and the powerful but discontinued Kia Stinger GT. There's also the Skoda Superb Sport line, which is priced closer to $70,000. This one specification Sonata has jumped up in price by a few $1,000s in comparison to before the facelift. That increase in price is offset by the introduction of new equipment like twin curved 12.3-inch infotainment displays, BlueLink connectivity, and upgraded safety equipment being the major additions. That's on top of stuff like heated and ventilated suede and Napa leather front seats, heated outboard rear seats and steering wheel, a head-up display, side and rear window sunshades, smart key with push-button start, 12-speaker Bose sound system, and the full gamut of LED lighting on the updated exterior. Under the bonnet is the same 2.5-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder petrol engine, which is happy on the cheaper 91 RON fuel, but makes a stout 213 kilowatts and 422 newton meters, spinning only the front wheels through an 8-speed wet dual-clutch automatic gearbox of Hyundai's own design, which has also been used in the likes of the Santa Fe and Hyundai i30N, as well as the Kia Sorento. In terms of dimensions, this Sonata N line is just under 5 meters long and a little under 1.5 meters high. It runs on a 2,840mm wheelbase and has a 480-litre boot. Big changes on the outside, but big changes on the inside as well in this new Sonata. The first thing you'll notice are these two twin 12.3-inch infotainment displays. If you've seen the new Hyundai Kona, you'd recognize these displays because they are, I guess, next-generation hardware and software. And this is the second time they've been used in the Australian market. They've got a little bit of a curve to them. Hyundai say it's a seamless display, but you can see there are two separate screens here in one housing. Does work quite well though. You've got all of the features like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, navigation, digital radio, all of those things. And the digital cluster in front of the driver also has a lot of information you can dig through as well. Looks nice and premium, very nice. Considering the asking price, I think this interior overall does have a lot going for it. The seats are comfortable. We've got some nice materials going on. Of course, that N-line badging there. It does look very nice. You've also got heating and ventilation along with electric adjustment for these seats. And in terms of practicalities, because Hyundai have moved the gear shifter now to the electric car style, I suppose, for the brand, it's now stalk off the steering column here to the side. You've got a bit more space here for storing things. Big wireless charging pad there. There's room for some other bits and bobs. 2 USB-C power outlets, plus a 12-volt hiding in there. So power is pretty well sorted. And then you've got a decent sized center console, 2 cup holders, and a spot for the keys. So in terms of everyday usage, this does work well. You've got digital style climate controls there, but still you've got dials and it's easy to operate. So you don't need to sort of dig around through the infotainment, which I do appreciate. And you've also got one of my favorite things, a volume dial. Hooray for volume dials for easy usage when you're driving. But otherwise, in total, this car looks good. I think on the inside, it also feels good in terms of build quality and materials, especially for the asking price. I think sedans have to play a little bit of a value role in comparison to SUVs these days. So you are getting good bang for buck, but the execution and presentation is also quite good in this new Sonata. Here's the second row of the Sonata. First thing, as always, to talk about is how much space is in the back here. And I think this would work as a family car because in comparison to SUVs, everyone's buying SUVs these days as the family choice, but a well-packaged sedan does still have good benefits, I think. That's my driving position up front there. I do sit relatively close to the steering wheel. I am a little bit under 6 foot tall, but as you can see there is loads of legroom on offer here. Headroom is a little bit tight perhaps, not amazing, but it is good enough. And in terms of fitting in baby seats and that sort of thing, we've got ISOFIX on both outboard seats here, and we've got 3 top tether points as well. So you could fit some family into the back here. Even rearward facing baby seats would fit as well. We've also got air vents. We've got USB-C power outlets in here. There are heated seats in this spec. You only get one spec of Hyundai Sonata in Australia at the moment, and it is this high spec model, so it does have a fair amount of gear. One thing I do like, as always, sunshades. But Hyundai have upped the game here, and you've also got an electric sunshade for the back there. I've only seen that on Lexus vehicles, I think, and some imported Toyotas in Australia. It's not something you see too often here, but if you do have kids sleeping in the back, it's a nice thing to have. There's a pop-down armrest here. There are 2 cup holders in there. There's plenty of room for 3, I think, in the back here. It might be a little bit tight, but for 2, this is plenty spacious and comfortable. And just because it's a sedan, not an SUV, doesn't mean this wouldn't suit family usage. There's enough room here for rearward facing baby seats and all of that sort of thing. The 2.5 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine hasn't been updated with the rest of the car, but you've got to say, probably didn't need much of an update either. It's got plenty of grunt there, and straight line performance is good, provided you can get that power down to the ground when roads are a little bit slippery or you're coming out of a corner. There is a little bit of torque steer. You can get wheel spin at times. Yes, there are some vehicles that are front wheel drive that can handle that kind of power. This one, you just have to be a little bit delicate with the throttle at times. We've got an 8-speed dual clutch automatic gearbox here, and that is actually a pretty good application. But I'm just going to stop there because do you hear that dinging? It's one thing I want to talk about with this car, and I've spoken about it with other Hyundais and Kias recently. It's the traffic sign recognition technology. Very good stuff to have, especially if you are counting your demerit points very closely, but it beeps a lot, and it beeps at times that it doesn't need to, and it does get quite frustrating. So if you're driving through a school zone, for example, when it's not school zone times, or you're driving past an off-ramp on the highway and it reads the sign off to the side, it will give you a false reading, and then it beeps at you, and it doesn't need to beep at you, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I find it highly frustrating. You can turn it off, but it means you turn off all of the traffic sign recognition technology, and then once you turn the car back on again, it's back on, so you're back at square one. I think there needs to be a better fix for that. Even just to turn off the beeping, I think would be a nice solution. Perhaps that will come in the future. But anyway, where was I? 8-speed dual clutch transmission. It's a good setup. It's not as easy to use outright as a torque converter gearbox, but there are great benefits there for when you're cruising around town and when you're giving this thing a little bit more of a hustle on the back roads. It shifts smartly, it shifts very quickly as well, and it does feel like a really nice companion to this engine. Hyundai have updated the chassis of this Sonata, not so much the suspension in terms of springs and shocks, but they've stiffened up the body, they've stiffened up some of the suspension mounts around the place, which means this car does feel a little bit sharper to drive overall. It's definitely stiffer through the body, you can feel that, but there is a trade-off there. This does, on some rougher road surfaces, start to feel a little bit jiggly at times, so you are able to hold your speed through corners, and it does feel quite rewarding to drive, to be honest with you. As you go through a speed bump, it just doesn't settle as much. It probably is a really good candidate for adaptive damping, just to give you a little bit of a broader application use there in the future. But otherwise, if you are enjoying driving your car on some nice quiet roads through some corners, this is a good car to do it with. I think this car would be a good candidate for adaptive damping in the future because this body is so much stiffer. If you were able to soften off the suspension a little bit more to get a little bit more ride comfort happening there, you don't need a whole lot more, but a little bit more would be nice, I think, especially on rougher B roads and that sort of thing. That would work quite well. But as it is at the moment, if you want a car that is fun to throw through corners, it's got a fair amount of performance there, holds its own mid-corner and that sort of thing, this is good, but just watch out for throttle applications coming out of a corner because there's definitely a little bit of torque steer to contend with there with this 2.5 litre engine. All in all, this Sonata does a lot of things that a sedan typically does quite well in comparison to SUVs. I'm comparing this to SUVs all the time because SUVs is what everyone buys, but sitting lower to the ground, having a little bit more engagement with the vehicle driving around the place, having some good performance under the bonnet makes this thing quite enjoyable to drive and appealing, I think, especially when you combine the new looks of this 2024 model. I think this does hit the spot pretty well. It's still kind of strange to talk about passenger vehicles and sedans as a niche offering, but that's exactly what they are these days. Everyone else pretty much is buying an SUV. Hyundai could have quite easily discontinued the Sonata in Australia and focused on SUVs like so many other car makers have done, but I do have to feel glad, I think, that Hyundai have continued with this car, especially with this new model, because it is an improved offering. It's not just the looks, they've improved dramatically, I think, but it's better on the inside, I think. And although that tech with the traffic sign recognition does get frustrating, there is some good safety technology involved in this car for family usage. Yes, there isn't an air gap safety rating, so you'll have to live with that, but otherwise, this car, it's got good performance, there's plenty of torque from that engine, it does handle reasonably well as well, a little bit jiggly at times on rough surfaces, but this is quite an accomplished car overall if you're still looking for a sedan.